Hey guys, I'm Eric Krasno, and welcome to the lead edition of Groove Shop. Join me as we explore the art of crafting lead guitar grooves and solos that embody my own twist of funk, soul, and R&B influences. I'll perform and break down the melodies and improvise solos for 10 tracks from my own solo and band recording projects in a variety of keys and feels. Along the way, I'll show you how I develop solos using feel, expressive bends, and vibrato, how I navigate changes, and the phrasing that makes modern funk, soul, and R&B so irresistible. Hopefully you'll pick up a few things to make your own to help you create more engaging and soulful lead guitar parts in your own style. Plus, the course features synchronized tab and notation, along with slow down, looping, and fretboard animation to help you learn at your own pace. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.
Hello, children of the fire, and welcome to a very special TrueFire live presentation. We have a great guest on tonight, Eric Krasno. You know him from many different things, the band Lettuce, the band Soul Live. But you must know him for his two projects that he has here at TrueFire, Groove Shop Lead and Groove Shop Rhythm. Before we kick things off, I just want to go ahead and tell everyone to leave down in the chat where you are watching this show. Also, if you have any questions for Eric, please leave them down in the chat and we will get to them as we go along. But before we kick everything off and start our conversation with the incomparable Eric Krasno, I want to bring on the host with the most, the man with the plan. He pronounces his what's with an H. It's Jeff Sheets.
Yes. Hello, Shane. How are you? And hello, everyone out there in TrueFire land. Awesome show, as Shane said. Shane, you're looking good there, my friend. So I appreciate the intro. We're going to get back to Shane here in a few minutes. Shane's cooked up some special fiery questions for Eric that we're going to go to after a bit. But yeah, let's talk about Eric. I mean, if you don't, I mean, Eric is a Grammy winner, an amazing guitarist, an amazing songwriter, an amazing producer. He just does it all. And as Shane said, the two courses he's done here at TrueFire are absolutely gems. They're perfectly fit into that funk, jazz, soul groove that really he is like the king of. So we're excited to talk about that. We'll play a couple things tonight. We'll basically answer your questions. So if you've got questions for Eric about anything he's got going on, if you've got questions about the courses, if you haven't picked up the courses, we'll have the link there for you to grab the course. The Rhythm edition is out right now. The lead edition is only on pre-order, but if you buy it right now, you'll have instant access to it. You don't even have to wait for it to come out. So another cool perk of snagging it here tonight. So without talking anymore about all that nonsense, let's bring Eric on and we can talk together. So Eric, how's it going, buddy?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. We're live. Everything is, looking good, sounding
Awesome.
good, nothing to it.
Good. Well, thank you so much for having me. And it was such a blast making these courses with you guys and being down there in the studio. So yeah. I'm curious, I'm excited to see how people respond to it and how they can kind of implement some of the things that we talk about in the course.
Yeah. Well, you cover so many cool topics here that are really, I think, important for every guitar player, right? Everybody needs to play great rhythm. They need to understand how to play in the pocket. They need to, understand how to layer parts, melody and harmony. Those are all things that you cover in these courses. And I think that really, is something that really anybody can use.
Absolutely, man. It's, one of the things that I talk about in the course and that I do on a daily basis, and I see some of the questions coming in, so it's influencing how I'm thinking about this, but, being in the studio and working with other artists, layering and finding the right feel for the track. Cause a lot of times I'll layer other instruments and do drums or drum programming so that's something that I don't see, a lot of people teach per se. And sometimes it is a little hard to describe, but it's something that I, think about quite a bit and try to incorporate then into my live playing as well. But I've spent so much time in the studio that it's my world is like this hybrid of the two. So I'm always kind of
Yeah.
thinking about that, when I'm coming up with a part or playing live.
Absolutely. And so I've got a question for you, and we've got some questions coming in, but I've got a great question right off the bat, which is something
Yeah.
that you do really well. And that's kind of playing, sort of smaller chord shapes and more thinking about the parts that go in there, almost a
Yeah.
little bit more arranging. Maybe talk a little bit about that and show us a couple examples of that, of, why you would want to play, a smaller shape or an inversion as opposed to just a big old clunky full chord.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is playing in ensembles and playing in bands where the bass player can play the bottom, like, and also playing with two guitars. With Lettuce, we had two guitarists a lot, and I got to do a lot of that. So part of it is also just kind of like, staying out of the way of other parts and defining something new. So like, one of the songs that we're going to talk about, Mulholland, it's really just taking the A major shape and the B minor shape, right? And what I'm doing is kind of taking this top, instead of playing the whole chord like that, I'm playing, and then I'm really just taking this, right? So it's really just taking these upper inversions and finding different shapes that can, where the chords can also involve different melodies, and using these chord shapes as melodies in these songs. And I do a lot of that in the King Canyon project, which was also partly like during the pandemic. I got really into kind of layering my guitars. I had time on my hands, and I was working a lot with Otis McDonald, who co-produced my solo record, but then we also did King Canyon together. And just like having time to like kind of come up with these parts. And initially I would layer them, and then I started, just finding different chord shapes that could become the melody of the song. And a lot of it's influenced by, the James Brown, where rather than play like this whole chord shape, those guys would often just play two notes. And another one's like the meters, that I just love I love those records, and I'm always incorporating little bits of those influences into my own stuff.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, and those guys are all, Leo and all those guys. That just
oh yeah,
that's how it reminds me of, all of your stuff, and the soul life stuff. Has always got that's a very similar vibe of really just finding the pocket, being in the
yeah,
groove there. And that's actually a good question that just came in,
yeah.
um, about that, which is, when we talk about playing in time, but
Mhm.
you can play on the beat, ahead of the beat, or behind the beat. So maybe talk
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
about that, because you do that so well. And I think that's something that's, super valuable for any rhythm guitar player, right? You got to know kind of what you're doing there.
Absolutely. And it comes down to the song too. So like, for example, on the James Brown thing I was just playing, it's very much on the beat, with the drummer. But then a lot of, especially the people that listen to hip hop and Jay Dilla and stuff, like some of the King Canyon stuff, where we're like playing with that so much, right? I mean, I always think back to like Jimi Hendrix too, was like, whether he knew it or not. I mean, like, again, it's also playing with the drummer and playing with the bass player. The meters are such a great example of that too. There was this push and pull between the drums and the guitar and the bass, and it's what created that feel. I mean, a lot of times, if a lot in production, you'll hear music that is quantized and perfectly in time, and it loses that funk and it loses that snap. And to me, it's all about that push and pull between dragging behind the beat or pushing on top of the beat, depending on what's happening with the rest of the music. So it's a little bit hard to show it on my own. But even like taking that James Brown thing, if you started to pull it back, it might be like, you know, versus. And again, it's like I've always been blessed to play with awesome drummers who can play with time like that. And so it just gives me that freedom to push and pull, and then they react off of that, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think that's really important for students to hear, because one thing I find with a lot of students is they kind of think, well, you're either playing on time or you're not. And they think the beat is just one small skinny thing, when the beat is really
Yeah.
kind of a bigger thing, you know. Each
Yeah.
beat has some room in there, you know. So that's really good
Absolutely.
advice. So let's take a look at the course. So I mean, you've done the rhythm edition of Groove Shop, right? And then
Yep.
we did the lead edition. And before we do that, the tracks, you know, are awesome. So these tracks were a lot of your tracks from the King Canyon stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've killer sounding tracks, basically.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Again, it was Otis McDonald and Mike Chavarro on bass. And Otis is a great producer and a great drummer and a great arranger. And during the pandemic, we started just sending music back and forth and just working remotely. And it worked amazingly well. You know, I have a studio, he has a studio. We were like kind of like, okay, we're stuck in our studios here. Let's start sending some stuff back and forth. And we made my whole solo album called Always, which is more of a vocal and songwriting album, but he added such a cool flavor. And then from that, we like just didn't want to stop. So we started creating kind of more instrumentals, or like, you know, the King Canyon stuff has vocal hooks and oohs and ahs, but it's really about the guitar melodies and the instruments. And we just hit it off, man. Like, it was just, we got so inspired sending stuff back and forth, and we started using this thing called Pedal, which is basically like FaceTime but with real high quality audio. And we were sending, so we could actually in real time like listen, and he could listen while I'm adding a part, and then I would send him the file and he would add the part. And we just had such a fun time doing that, and kind of layering all these parts, and it just became a band. And we don't really tour, but we've done a handful of shows, and
Right.
and people seem to really like the music. So we're actually in the process of making the album too now.
Nice.
But it was so great that I got to utilize that for these courses, because it's like it's also very current to what I'm into, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so it was fun for me to play along with these tracks, and also break down like how I put them together, what
Right.
inspired the sounds, and what inspired you know, the approach.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Tommy, are you there? Let's bring up a track and kind of talk about that. This is Tommy. He's in charge of everything in the studio at TrueFire. He is head of production. He produced this course with Eric, and you know, take us a little bit, Tommy, through one of these tracks and show some of the cool things that you can do. So for a student that's wanting to learn, man, there's so many cool tools available to help you learn.
Yeah, I mean, Eric was a real pleasure to work with in the studio, and I was a big fan of the King Canyon record, and I mean, it's still a record that I throw on all the time. And it was such a pleasure to work through both on the rhythm side and on the lead side of this course. Go through each of these tunes. You know, we basically went through a lot of the record and really dove deep into how the rhythm parts were structured. There's so many layers, you know, so many layers for different parts and the way they fit together, you know. So yeah, a lot of people that are tuned in too, I think, are coming to us from maybe from Eric's World or from Facebook or from one of the other channels. And if you're not familiar, this is the TrueFire platform. And I'll just give you a quick tour. We'll look at one of the videos. You have the video player in the middle. One of the cool things that you have with all of these courses is you have the ability to have the tablature synchronized to the video. And of course, there are jam tracks that give you a chance to put to work exactly what he's showing you in each of the lessons, which is great. But yeah, let's take a look at one of these performances. This is the solo from Mulholland. I'll give it a play. So sweet. So it's really cool. I mean, along with all these performance vids, you have the ability, if you're learning and want to pick up a couple of lines from Eric, you have the tab and you can drop into any one of those bars and pick up, really, really good study tools. You push play there. Kind of like a little bit of like a phrase trainer kind of thing. If you wanted to, you can slow things
So
down.
cool.
You could speed things up. There's a neck diagram, so you could take a closer look at the way it would lay out on your fretboard, which is awesome. And all that's built in right in the player. So it's a really, really cool experience for learning not only some of the insights from Eric and the way he approaches the music, but if you want to dig in on the guitar side and pick up some really tasty lines, obviously there's some good stuff in there. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I was blown away by all of that. I mean, I wish I'd had that when I was like first learning. It's still an awesome tool because I'm still learning forever, but I just think back of like having to, slow down the record and then try to figure out the new key and then trying to,
Yeah.
just having it all right there is
It's,
amazing.
it's almost like cheating,
I know, right?
It's like, come on. It's
I know. I'm kind of
I know.
afraid of where guitar players are going to be in like a decade.
Right.
But
crazy.
But yeah, it's really cool to hear that. And another side note that the solo it was really the end solo on this song is actually Derek Trucks on the album. So I can
Right.
hear myself in this one, like trying to play
Yeah.
slide, trying to play like
Some of
Derek
those
licks.
lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, like without a slide, playing slide without a slide a little bit.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Sounds great.
but it's really cool to watch it and see some of my playing get broken down into notation and stuff. Really
Yeah.
cool.
It's really cool, man.
Awesome. Awesome, man. All right. Thank you, Tommy. That's very cool.
course.
It's amazing. Amazing course. Great technology. If you want to grab this course, I think the links are right below the video. So check it out. A couple questions coming in. So let's do a couple quick
Yeah.
questions here.
Absolutely.
Any tips at getting better at harmonizing lead parts? He says, Joshua says, you do seem to do that effortlessly. So how do you approach that if you want to harmonize a lead part?
Well, as any guitar player growing up, the Allman Brothers were such a huge thing, and that was their thing, was the guitarmony, which is the tone. I don't know if that's a real term, but it's what I've called it for years. And I'm sure I didn't come up with it, but it's just what I say. But yeah, I mean, learning some of that music, playing along with other people, and then if you have the ability to either loop yourself or layer yourself with a multi-track recorder, which is a lot easier than it was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I had the 4-track tape machine little thing, and I would try doing it that way. But yeah, I would say, learning what other people do. I mean, and then also not necessarily like doing 1, 3, and 5 it's always kind of the first thing you try, So if you're like, then and you stack up in thirds, like so you can try playing it with a chord. It's like, so if you hear I'm playing, right? So, sometimes it's just following the chords like that and then kind of stacking thirds, but then doesn't always, you don't have to stick to that plan. Like if you actually look at a lot of the Allman Brothers stuff, it'll go thirds, then it'll go fourths, and then fifths, and then back. And so, it's really it's a fun experimental thing that I'm always kind of just messing with, and I'll use other references, and I'll listen to other things like piano players or how horn sections are put together. Like in the early Lettuce and even the Soul Live days, we would arrange the horns just based on like what we were playing. At that point, I wasn't really like sitting down and writing it out with notation. Eventually I started doing that, but so that was like part of the inspiration originally too, was like we'd have a horn section. Okay, what are they going to play? And we'd figure out some lines. And then I just started doing it myself with a looper or with multi-track recording. And like I said, you kind of start with what's diatonic to the chord progression, but then use the tension as an effect in the music too, so there are times when you don't want it to sound pretty and you want it to like lean into something grittier or maybe show tension before the release. So yeah, I don't know, I'm always experimenting with it, but I'd say that it was rooted in listening to, at least guitar wise, the Allman Brothers, and then from there I kind of started toying with all different types of styles.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Good advice there for sure. Other question is, what's the guitar you're playing? Give us a quick guitar.
Oh yeah,
you're
so
playing.
yeah, this is a D'Angelico. It's actually my signature model Brighton that came out last year, and they're unfortunately they're all sold out now, but we're about to do the second edition, which is going to have a couple color changes, and we're going to do a trem bar.
Nice.
Actually, I don't have it right here. I wish I did, but so I have the prototype. But this is my main axe that I play, and it's really cool. It's the pickups are kind of the big specialized item in here because they're single coil, but they're in this humbucker casing, which has such a cool vibe, and it's kind of like Strat-ish. I mean, I basically was like, I want to build a guitar that has elements of like my three favorite guitars, and it was like my SG, my Strat, and my like 335 kind of style guitar. I want to be able to do all of those things with one guitar, so like it has this kind of that I always had trouble getting that out of my 335, but then it still has the and then it also kind of has this so it kind of just, it's very versatile but also very simple, and it kind of has a telly setup where it's just three positions and just volume and tone, because I just wanted it super simple. So that's the setup, but it's become my main thing, and that was the challenge. It's like, how do I make it my absolute favorite instrument amongst a lot of instruments? So.
Well, yeah, you have a lot to choose from, so it's hard to work its way up to the top of the heap.
Yeah,
looks like that one did it. So
yeah,
very cool.
I do love it.
Yeah, awesome, man. So all right, well, we got a couple more questions rolling in, but let's bring Shane back. Are you prepared to bring Shane back in here? I mean, it takes a little bit of mental preparation, and then you have to say, okay, let's do it. So I say we bring Shane back in, see what he's got cooked up. Shane.
Eric Theodore Krasno. Is Theodore your middle name?
No, it's not, but that's okay. It's a good guess. It's Peter, which isn't, I guess you're like in the same realm.
It's pretty close. Is it true that you were part of a band called Lettuce?
Absolutely.
I've got a list of several other bands with food or ingredients for names.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little rapid fire here, and you're going to have to choose one or the other. This is also an opportunity for everybody in the chat to play along as well.
Okay, I love it.
So are you ready to go?
Let's go.
First up, we got the Cranberries or the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
All right, chat, put your answer down in the chat. Next up, you got the Black Eyed Peas or Pearl Jam.
Ooh, That's a tough. I may have to. I'm gonna go Pearl Jam. I guess it's a tough
Pearl
one.
Jam. All right. Next up, we got the Smashing Pumpkins or Salt and Pepper.
Oh man, I'm gonna sound like I'm not a hip hop fan, but I'm gonna go Smashing Pumpkins. I'm gonna go rock again.
You know, when you and I first spoke, you told me how you worked with 50 Cent and Exhibit.
Yeah,
And
that's right. I told you that story.
He's a
right?
very popular
Yeah.
Artist from the East Coast and an artist who's also from the West Coast. Let's throw ourselves back in time to the 1990s. Knowing what we know now and all the information that we have from that feud and that time frame in the 90s, would you be Team Suge Knight or Team P. Diddy?
Oh, dude. That is putting me in a big pickle, but I guess I'm going to go Suge Knight because I can't go Diddy. There's just no Diddy. There's no Diddy going on here.
There is no right answer to that question. And
There's no right answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Theodore. We'll be back
that
later.
was a tough one.
All right.
That was a tough one.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Shane. All right. Well, you got to stay on your toes at these TrueFire lives because you never know what's coming. So
it's funny. There are a lot of food band names out there. You know,
there are. That's amazing that you can just name your band after food. Who would have thought, right?
I know. Well, honestly, the lettuce thing was really kind of a joke that never went away. We kind of were joking, and then we were like, "Well, that's our name now."
It's be careful what you wish for or joke about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. We got another question, which is, kind of about your course, about the lead edition, kind of if it helps someone like find their way around the neck. But I guess the question that I'd kind of boil this down to is, what advice would you have about someone who's trying to get around the neck a little bit more, who feels like they're kind of stuck in one place, kind of doing the same stuff in a rut? What would you suggest sort of for them to get sort of moving around a little bit?
That's a good question. I mean, first off, I would learn your favorite licks all over the neck and learn pentatonic is, the thing about the pentatonic scale is that you can apply it so many ways over and it can have so many different uses, so like I mean, that's all the same thing, but it was playing up and down the neck. You know what I mean? So like learning the same riff, being able to play the same riff in a million different places, then you can use, even your go-to riffs as launch pads to get to other things, So I think I remember just spending so much time learning every position of every pentatonic, and then applying that over different chords, so like if right now I'm just playing like G minor, and that's basically G Dorian. And just knowing that up and down every single position is such, and like I like to practice musically. So if I like to take a groove and if you sometimes a looping pedal can be really helpful. Sometimes it can box you in, but that's a really great tool, is like playing over a groove and just like making yourself play and move up the neck and try it in all different positions, and then start connecting it back and forth. So it's a little bit of what I would do.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great answer. While we're kind of talking about moving around the neck and doing sort of parts, one of the big things, like we mentioned earlier, that you really talk a lot about is layering parts, right?
Yeah.
Layering parts and not thinking, oh, here's just my guitar part and that's it. How do you go about that? Like, where does that come from? If you've got, say you got the drummers laying down a groove, bass player's doing something, are you listening to and already thinking about multiple parts, or do you sort of come up with one part, then layer the next one on, and then the other one sort of makes itself clear after the fact, or are you hearing those all at once?
sometimes I hear a bunch of things at once. I mean, usually I'll try to focus on hearing one thing. And, I guess this also goes back to that last question, is that I always want to make my parts singable. So, like, a lot of times when I'm practicing guitar, at least when I was learning in the beginning, especially, is being able to translate what you're hearing in your head and what you're singing in your head to your fingers. You know what I mean? So, a lot of times I will sit and listen for a while before I start playing, so I'll listen, I'll start singing something, and then that will become what I start playing. And then, where my fingers feel right, then might influence kind of how it evolves. But, I always think about like the drummer, like, and, in like West African drumming too, it's all about these parts all fitting together rhythmically. So I'll think rhythmically first, like where it fits in, and then think about, okay, what notes do I want to play in that spot? And then the other thing is, if you're dealing with a vocalist or just like a melody period, you generally want to either join in with it or stay out of the way of it. So that's always something I think about, is like, if you're gonna play where the vocal is, make sure you're supporting it, or that you're playing around it. But if you're playing at the same time as the vocal, make sure it doesn't rub. You know what I mean? And that kind of goes for all the instruments that you're joining with. I think a lot of times in this day and age, I hate to sound like the old guy, we want to throw a million things at because we have so many options now versus, because we can overdub a million things. I think that it's still always, if you listen to those old Motown records, right? It's like the parts were so great because the band worked in a room together and got those parts right, because they couldn't really overdub a million things. There was a certain amount of tracks, and they worked so well together, and they played so well together. So now, even when I'm layering stuff, I'm thinking about that. Less is more, in my opinion. It's like you can have 3 or 4 parts in a song, and if they're really great, that's all you'll ever need.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. So do you prefer playing in a trio or playing with a stage full of players?
Oh man, I love both. I love the freedom of a trio, and in terms of improvisation and where that can go, because the communication, with Soul Live, for example, there was only one other harmonic instrument, so we could go anywhere we wanted. So in terms of improvising and coming up with stuff, even in the studio too, it's so easy, because it's what we got to a point where we could just look at each other and do this or do that, and we knew what that meant. We could move around, or like, hey, well, let's take, let's modulate up a whole step, and you're not communicating that to like 17 people, and you're not sure if they can hear you, on stage. But I also, just the power of playing with a horn section and a big, huge band. I mean, that Lettuce was that too. It's like, having 2 guitars and 3 horn players and percussion and drums and keyboards and vocals, and there's just the power of that is undeniable.
Yeah.
So I love both.
Nice. That's awesome. At the risk of ruining the whole night, I'm going to do it and say, let's bring Shane back in for another segment. It's going really well.
Oh yeah.
But
Okay.
I think we bring him back in. We love Shane, and he does an awesome job at these segments. I bet he's got something else cooking.
What do you got?
Well, Eric, Theodore, Peter, Krasno. Is it true that your parents named you Peter after Peter Frampton or Peter Parker?
Oh, that's a good question, but I don't know. I'd have to ask them. I'm going to say Frampton, though. I'm going to say Frampton.
All right, now I got some tough trivia questions for you.
All right, let's go.
All right. So, in 2009, Soul Live played the festivities at the MLS All-Star Game, where the MLS All-Stars played Everton from the Premier League. Who won that game?
No idea.
It was a draw. So
It was a draw.
Yeah, nobody won. Sorry, that was a little anticlimactic.
That's okay.
So,
that's okay.
Something you should know about me is one of my favorite shows is the British TV show Taskmaster.
Okay.
In 2018, America tried to do its own version, and it was hosted by someone that you've worked with.
Oh, really? I have no idea. I'm really whiffing right now on this.
Well, I
Do I
didn't
get a
pick these.
can I get a clue?
You've performed with him while you were in the band Soul Live.
Okay. Dave Matthews?
No.
No.
Let's see if I can give you one more. He's also a comedian.
Oh, Reggie Watts.
Reggie Watts. There you go.
Nice.
I pretty much hand fed you that one.
Yeah, that was good.
We're going to take it. And this next one is from a segment I like to call Asking for a Friend.
Yeah.
It is the holiday season. So how do you deal with seasonal depression?
I just play
Asking
a lot
for
of
a
music.
friend.
Play a lot of music. Get together with people.
Mhm.
Don't just hang out by yourself. Get out of the house.
All right.
That's my trick.
So get out of the house.
Yeah.
Can't do it. Back to you, Jeff.
All right. You can't say I didn't warn you, Eric. We're bringing
Yeah.
Shane in, but thank you, Shane.
No, I
so
love
much
it.
for that.
I should have, I think my score was pretty low. Hopefully I gotta come back from that.
You do. I think we can bring this back home and have you play a little guitar, because here's what I want to see. When somebody says, hey, I need a vocabulary of funk chords.
Yeah.
If you sat down with somebody and said, man, I want to play some funk, what's the funkiest thing I should be playing? How would you approach that? What would you give somebody to work on if they wanted to, kind of get a funk vibe going?
Well, I would say like the dominant 7 and the 9 chords, so like, sorry, the mic things were right in the, but I'm going to move that a little bit. But so like, this is like a D7 right here that I'm playing. Right. And the other thing that's going on there that's important is that my left hand is muting the strings when I don't want the chord to be heard. So my right hand is playing consistent, like a hi-hat. That's without the chord. So right. So for example, also there's probably more reverb than I would do normally with that. But like this right here, you're really just barring these top 3 strings on the 5th fret. That's, but you can play it like this where you're actually playing. But a lot of times, and that, which is such an easy chord to play, but it's all about that muting and not muting. Right. So I think that's kind of like, what's the Led Zeppelin song? The crunge is like that chord. Right. And then, it's really a James Brown thing. And, you can go between like that traditional kind of 7 chord. So I'd see those are like the 2 really important chords to start with. And then the sharp 9, which is basically that same chord, but then the raised 9, otherwise known as the Hendrix chord. What I like to do, just to give you one of my inside little things, is take this chord and combine it with this, and then the 9, and then the 7. And then that you're really, so that way if the bass player is just laying on a D, and you want to play a 7 chord over it, you can kind of like put this cool melodic thing on top. So, right. And I've done that. I mean, countless recordings that I have where I'm kind of like working with those kind of 3 shapes there. So this one, this one, this one, and then, right. And then also adds that 11, I think, on top. So, that's a short little version of,
Cool.
of the funk chord diagrams.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's really, really good stuff, because I know a lot of players are kind of like, man, I love that sound. I'm just not sure how to do it. So I think that's some good some good tips. We've got another question. We'll take a couple questions here. Somebody's got any other questions? Shout out. So Joshua says you've lived in New York City and LA, and do you have any specific networking advice when you're trying to break into a big music city? How can you stand out from all the other amazing talent? So what would you advise somebody if they're trying to kind of get noticed?
Well, I think learning about every aspect of what being a musician is, it was really important to me in the very beginning. So like also just like knowing what the book is. So I guess let's just starting from the very basics, knowing what managers do, knowing what agents do, knowing what booking people do, and understanding like what that is, because I guess what happens in music is like you build in a perfect world you build a team, but it's really great to know what each team member does, so that, which seems like a simple thing, but in the very beginning I had to learn, like, what does a booking agent do, what does a producer do, so learning a little about that, and then meeting people that do that job, and really just learning from them and absorbing whatever you can from them. So like a lot of what I learned about recording and producing happened when Soul Live was making records. We got to work with great engineers, great producers. I mean, I had learned about it previous to that, but once you're in a room with these people that have been doing it professionally for a long time, I was trying to absorb as much as I could from those people, and I would get there early and stay late and ask a lot of questions, maybe to an annoying degree, but I would just say, put yourself out there. That's a huge thing. Put yourself out there. Go out, see people perform as much as you can. Meet other artists that you love. Work with them, and eventually they'll you'll get in the right rooms. You know what I mean? That's kind of like at least what I did when I first moved to New York. I just went out and saw a million bands and worked with as many people as I could. And as much as I wanted to work with them, I was also really wanting to learn from them. So I think that's a key difference too, is like, you got to come in knowing that you have a lot to learn and ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. So let's talk a little bit about what else you got going on. Obviously, we've got the rhythm edition of the Groove Shop is already out. I think we got the link in the chat for everybody if you want to go check that out. Lead edition is out right now just for you guys that are watching tonight. So go check that out. You can get the pre-order advanced insight into that. So go pick that up. But what else you got going on? I mean, so you have a studio and you're a producer. You do a lot of things there in your studio. Tell us a little bit about your studio, maybe. Talk a little bit about some of the what you got going on.
Yeah. So my studio is at my house on my property. It was the previous owner actually had built this room I'm in now. And then I built a live room, which is directly behind this computer, where we have a glass that goes in there. And, I have a hybrid of like analog gear, digital. I have a lot of universal audio. It's kind of like the brain of a lot of my stuff, but I have tons of old analog stuff that I kind of hybrid in there. And but yeah, I've been recording since I can remember, and I produced tons of records. This past year or two has been super busy in here, and gotten to the point where we do everything here now, which is really exciting. We mix everything. I do the writing in here. I track all of everything, and in a lot of cases I play all the instruments, or at least so for example, today I had Emily Brimlow, amazing singer-songwriter, in here, and we wrote the song together. I'll put down like a basic kind of drum beat, and then we'll write the bass and the guitar. We'll build the track, and then once I have the vocals and the melody, I'll start flourishing. And if I need to bring other musicians in, we do, and we'll bring in whatever it is, from horn players to drummers, maybe a keyboard player. I do play keys and drums, but simply, but a lot of times that's what the track needs. So that's what will stay. But then, for example, like I did Mark Broussard's album recently, and we pretty much did everything, just he and I, but then Jeremy Most came in, who also plays a lot of different things, and he would add things to it. And then I think we brought a trumpet player, but pretty much other than that, it was just us. And then I have a record coming out. We have 2 singles that already came out with an artist named Sun Little. And this is a collaborative project we created called Roll Mega. and he's an incredible soul singer and songwriter. And again, that record is primarily just he and I, and we would build the tracks in this room. And then in certain cases, he would bring it back to he has a studio at his house in Atlanta, and he would send me vocals. So we would do the main tracking here, and he would do vocals there, and he'd send it. So that, yeah, there's a lot of it's done here, but then we'll send things back and forth to people if needed. I just did a project with Alan Stone, where we did everything here, he and I, and a keyboard player, Swati, and then I brought a trumpet player in who layered horns for that. And so it's kind of different every time. I'm like prepared to do everything that's needed, but also, love bringing musicians in. I did a record that's not out yet for an artist named Taylor Ray, where we set up a rhythm section in this room and tracked her playing guitar and singing. I played bass, keys, and drums, and we did the whole meat of the record that way. And then I went back and added flourishes and edited and did a lot of stuff after. So there's a few different approaches that I take here.
That's amazing. So you're versatile with all that stuff, right? So how did you learn that? Like who was your influences that basically inspired you to do these different things, and from a production and arranging and writing standpoint, as well as guitar, but how did you learn how to do all that?
That's an interesting question. So I was always just so curious about what producing was, to be honest. When I was a kid, I was so into records, and I would read about, back when we had liner notes. Remember liner notes? So but with records, my dad's records, I'd be like, who did this and who did that and what did this guy do? And so I was always just kind of obsessed with that. Like obviously Quincy Jones, rest in peace, was someone I was always so curious about what he did. I knew he was a great player. I knew he was an arranger. And as I started to learn how to record, I was always just so interested in that. And I wanted to do it as an artist, but I also wanted to work with other singers and other players. And it was this way to make records that didn't in different styles. Cause I've been such a fan of so many different styles. Like I grew up on hip hop and rock and roll and funk, and I love Brazilian music and I love reggae and I love all these different things. So it's like, when you're a producer, you get to make records, and it doesn't have to be cohesive with the last record you made, because you're working with different people. And there was something about that. Like I would watch, Quincy Jones make like Thriller, and then he would do like a hip hop album, and then he would do a jazz album. And I'm like, oh man, like that's what I want to do. I want to be able to step into these different worlds and be a part of it, which is hard to do as an artist, but as a producer, you get to like do all of it.
Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely. You got, there's no limit on what you can do when you're producing. You can go in a lot of different directions, be working on a couple different projects all at once, as a matter of fact. And
which is what's happened. Yeah, that's kind of what always happens in here. Pretty like day to day is totally, I went like that one week I had, Alan Stone, Talib Kweli, Aloe Black, and Taylor Ray all in the same like week, so it was like a hip hop artist, straight up R&B, and then like a soul hip hop artist, and then a pretty like an Americana like songwriter,
right?
All in the same week. And it was it was all fun, I mean, I love that element of being in that as a producer or in the recording world.
Awesome. All right, got one more guitar question here for you too. In this, we talk a lot about the melody, so show us a couple of examples of how you would think about, if someone says, man, I'm trying to come up with a melody, I really need a better melody, not just a ripping solo or whatever.
Yeah.
But are you singing that melody first, or are you finding it on guitar? Do you hear it in your head? How do you approach that?
I almost always hear it in my head first, and then have to find it on the guitar, so, and a lot of times I want it to be, and honestly, this applies to soloing too. I want it to be singable, that's always, I want it to be hummable by someone who's not a musician, so that's always like a goal for me, is like those earworms, you know.
Yeah.
Like like Mulholland, you know, that first part is all chord melody. And it's such a simple melody. And then the other part. It's all, I mean, it's all right in there, but it's all about phrasing. I think what I always think of is like I am trying to sound like my favorite singers. You know, it's I'm trying to sound like you know, Aretha Franklin or Donny Hathaway or Stevie Wonder or even Robert Plant. You know, it's like um I'm always that's the stuff that I think about when
Right.
I'm thinking like what are some great melodies. You know, I'll reference those records that I grew up on
Yeah.
and be like, okay, why was that one so good?
Right.
You know?
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. So I think we're gonna roll a track here. Let's roll. We're gonna roll. Moving on. Is that what we got? I think
I'll keep
lined
on
up.
moving. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, keep on moving.
yeah,
Let's do that.
yeah,
Let's roll that, Tommy, and we'll watch this. Check this out, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about afterwards before we
yeah.
go out. We'll talk a little bit about you know, sort of the harmony kind of thing that you got going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
cool.
cool.
Very cool. So, yeah, let's talk about harmony. You know, we
Mm.
talked a little bit about it before. How do you create a harmony? But when you're layering those parts, yeah, tell us about that harmony you got going on
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I came up, and again, it's so funny because now that I'm thinking about that one, I remember like I was thinking about it like it would be a horn part, but it was the pandemic and I didn't have access to a horn section. So that initial line, like I was kind of hearing this like marching, you know, and then it's funny now that I was watching it back, I'm noticing that I started out. It made perfect sense to start with that as a third. So, but then you know it switches between mostly thirds, and then I end on the five, which just kind of has this like, you know, what I don't even know. Sometimes I think about it that way. It's just like, what emotion am I? What emotion am I going for? And I was going for like this marching kind of like um, anthemic kind of thing. So like landing on that seemed right, you know, better than it seemed better than that, you know. So, but I
Right.
like starting with the. So, yeah, it's about with that song again. It's called "Keep on Moving." And that's the energy that it has, is this kind
Yeah.
of this movement. So you know, I was trying to translate that the best that I could.
Well, it worked. It worked. I think
Yeah,
that's awesome. Um, so you know, let's talk a little bit about. So we've got the groove shop. We've got the rhythm edition and the lead edition.
yeah.
So putting those together, how do you kind of approach that and splitting that up? You know, how does you know you compartmentalize those things in your head of this is the rhythm, important rhythm stuff, which you cover a ton of great rhythm subjects in there, and then the lead edition.
Yeah.
How do you kind of break those up?
That's a good question. I don't always I don't always have one way or the other, but I'd say I usually like play the rhythm part first. You know what I mean? So like so on this one. So in this one, I love to double the bass line and then play a rhythm part. So I probably on the recording had two parts. So one was, and that's just a minor chord, and then I'm moving up a whole step and kind of going down. It's like fourths. And then I'm playing, and then I'm doubling the bass line. And a lot of times what I'm doing there is I'm palm muting and doing this kind of pick thing. And again, a lot of it is I'm muting and doing that rhythmic thing. Right, and that there's something about those little nuances in between that rhythmic thing that adds so much to the track, even though it's not like there's no note going on there, but those in betweens make that feel that you're going for, right? And then once I have that kind of rhythm and like bass double thing, a lot of times I'll then come up with the melody. So that's like a general formula. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's kind of like how I'll break it down in my head.
Nice. Awesome. Well, we've got two great courses for anyone out there. If you probably maybe you've already got the rhythm version, the lead version is available now. If you haven't, you should pick them both up. There's going to be links here under the video. You will be able to rewatch this whole thing and get more insights from Eric. But Eric, thank you so much for being here and doing this tonight.
Absolutely.
We certainly appreciate it. Thank you, Shane, for being here and all your hard work. Thank you, Tommy.
Of course,
for running everything. It's been smooth as butter because we're working with a pro like yourself. So
I appreciate it. Next time I'm going to have better answers for Shane. I'm going to get my score up. I'm going to get my score up next time.
Hey, Shane keeps us all enjoying doing these things. Yes, for sure. Right. So we'd just be a bunch of boring guitar nerds if we didn't have Shane to insert a little bit of lively to what we do. So. But thank you again, Eric, and everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jeff Sheets, and thank you guys for being a part of the TrueFire family. And we're going to play a little video on the way out, I believe.
Awesome.
Thanks Eric.
Again. Thanks a lot, guys. Hey guys, I'm Eric Krasno. Welcome to the lead edition of Groove Shop. Join me as we explore the art of crafting lead guitar grooves and solos that embody my own twist of funk, soul, and R&B influences. I'll perform and break down the melodies and improvise solos for 10 tracks from my own solo and band recording projects in a variety of keys and feels. Along the way, I'll show you how I develop solos using feel, expressive bends, and vibrato, how I navigate changes, and the phrasing that makes modern funk, soul, and R&B so irresistible. Hopefully you'll pick up a few things to make your own to help you create more engaging and soulful lead guitar parts in your own style. Plus, the course features synchronized tab and notation, along with slow down, looping, and fretboard animation to help you learn at your own pace. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.